But you've got to think about your destination. Don't think about what happened here. Forget about these rocks. Forget about this underwater village. If you think about the past, you'll return to it. Think about your destination, your goal, and you'll get there. So with this advice, they tie the bag shut, they throw them into the ocean. Actually, they count to 4. Teich, dek, nas, tachun, in Klingon. And they throw him into the water, and the bag is bouncing around, and he's getting seasick and, well, frustrated. I should be home by now. I bet I haven't gone anywhere. I think I'm back at the rocks. And then he pulls the cords open, and he peeks out, and that's exactly where he is. He's back where he started. And in his own mind, he hears the voice of the Tan saying, "We told you not to think about this place. Leave the past behind you." So he pulls the cord shut. He concentrates on home, sleeping in his own bed, seeing his wife again, having a home-cooked meal, everything that you could possibly think of about getting home. And before long, this device washes ashore. He pulls it open, and he recognizes by the full moon the silhouette of the mountains. He knows where he is on his own island. Home is that way. So he starts walking down the beach. Halfway to the village, however, he's startled by a noise behind him. He stops dead in his tracks. What was that? We have bears and wolves in the forests here. It might not be safe. So he's very quiet. No, it's not a bear. It's not a wolf. He takes a few steps in that direction. No, it's a human being. And he heads in that direction and discovers from a distance his wife. She's out in the forest, crying in the middle of the night. Of course, because she got this horrible news a few hours back. And she spots him. And she's startled, and she begins backing away. "Stay away from me, the ghost of my husband. Don't come closer, the ghost of Nasitlane." He says to her, "Honey, it's me. It's not my ghost." She said, "No, my brothers told me yesterday that you fell into the ocean and drowned. That's not what happened." Then he tells her what really happened. And the more he tells her, the angrier and more indignant she gets. "What are you going to do about this?" "Oh, I've got a plan. I've been thinking about it for some hours. I need your help. Go into the village and get me my carving tools, my axe, my adze, my knives, everything I use for carving. I need all of that stuff. Bring it out here, but don't wake anybody up, and don't tell anyone I've returned." "What are you up to?" "Never mind, you'll see tomorrow." So she sneaks back into the village. She finds his box of carving tools. She brings it out into the forest, and he says, "Now you go to bed, dear, and don't tell anyone I'm home, especially not your brothers. I've got a plan for them tomorrow." He takes a log of spruce wood, and he designs and carves a killing machine. The first killer whale in world history. And Keat, it's the name of the story, Keat. He carves a killer whale out of spruce wood, but it has no spirit. It just lies there and doesn't do anything. So he tries a second time. You can tell he'll try 4 times. The second time he tries alder. Alder is sleek and hard. Hard as a rock. Unfortunately, this killer whale swam like a rock. It just sank and didn't do anything again. The third time he tried red cedar, he carved another killer whale. Again, nothing happened. Finally, he found a yellow cedar log and carved a killer whale from that, and it came to life. And once he was successful, he carved another and another and another. By morning, he had 10, 12, 15 killer whales. And then he gave them their marching orders, or their swimming orders. "My brothers-in-law are going to go fishing into the deepest part of the bay. I want you to surround them underwater. And simultaneously, I want you all to breach, to come nose first out of the water, lifting your entire body above the waterline, and splash down. I want you to scare them, well, really good. Keep your mouths open so they see all your teeth. And when you splash down, you're going to create such a wave. If we're lucky, we can throw those guys completely out of their boat into the cold water. Then I want you to go after the boat. I want nothing left of that boat. I want that boat turned to toothpicks. And then I want you to go after them and eat them alive." Well, the killer whales, they've been invented for this purpose, so they go out and they do all the whole thing. And Nasitlane is standing on a hill cheering these killing machines on. "Get them, kill them." But as this is happening, he begins to hear these men's screams, first in terror simply by the whole adventure, the whole confrontation. And then, as they're being torn apart by the killer whales and the ocean's turning red with their blood. It's a horror scene, and Nasitlane is yelling, "Stop, stop, stop! They tried to kill me. we should have just given him a good scare. I've gone too far. But it's too late. The brothers are gone. Nausithoné returns to talk to his creatures and says, you know, I went too far. I was so angry, I had to get my revenge, but revenge is equal, and this is out of balance. They scared me, they tried to kill me, but I'm still alive. I tell you what, I cannot keep you, killer whales. I cannot control you. You're faster, stronger, in many ways wiser than I. I'm going to set you free. You can go to any of the oceans of the world you want, on one condition. You must never do again what you did today. You must never again harm human beings. The price of your freedom, I set you free, but in return, you must never kill humans. And the killer whales get it, and they scatter. To this day, there is no recorded record of a killer whale harming a human being, except where human beings have incarcerated them. You take away their freedom, and the deal is off. So the 2 or 3 trainers at SeaWorld who have been killed by their killer whales, they could say, well, see, you broke the deal. You're not keeping... Of course, they've never heard this story. Now, Nausithoné can't go home. He's gone too far. His anger, his revenge, has destroyed his own life. He can't face his wife. He just killed her 4 brothers. He can't face their wives and kids. How can he? So he has no choice. He walks into the forest and is never heard from. And that's the end of Nausithoné. To this day, as you write from this story, when a Tlingit person dies, they never say he or she died. They say he walked into the forest. So you see, there are these metaphors that come out of this story that are used constantly throughout the culture. Now, you see, the other thing here is, it's really not exactly a Christian gospel, but when you think about it, it sort of is. The sea lions were the wisest creature in the story. They said, forgive. They didn't use that word. Leave the past behind you. Don't think about what happened here. Leave what happened here, here. Don't take it home with you. He didn't do that. He took it home, and his anger, his indignation, his revenge destroyed his life. It's a wonderful story to tell incarcerated teenagers. They almost always have done something in a fit of anger. And it's biological, you know. Hothead is a folk expression, but it's literally true. When you get angry enough, your brain actually, the temperature of your brain rises. And when that happens, your thinking, rational, creative, thinking brain shuts off. So in the heat of an argument, people will say things they know aren't true. It just comes out because they're so angry. Your rational brain can't work when you're that angry. And that's what happened with Nausithoné. Basically, the sea lion said, cool off, settle down, leave the past behind. He couldn't do it, and he not only destroyed his brothers-in-law, he ruined his life and the life of the family and all the rest. And that's what anger can do. See, what I'm saying is, in these old stories, especially in a situation like where I work at the hospital, you really can't go in and tell biblical parables because it's like illegal. You're pushing your religion. But I can go in and tell Tlingit stories with the same moral, right? Wearing my cassock, that's not the issue. And encourage these kids to change the way they see the world, change the way they play the ballgame of life, using Alaskan Native stories, because thanks to Richard and Nora Dauenhauer, we have these Tlingit stories to tell them. It's like scripture, except it's non-denominational, non-sectarian, it's folklore. Right? So I'm a subversive Christian in this sense. Not that I'm sneaking in a shirt and a tie, or like a frontiersman or a woodsman. I'm in my cassock. I never compromise on that. But the message is still basically, you see, forgive. If you don't forgiveness is not what you do for the other guy. Forgiveness is what you do for your own spiritual well-being and health. And to not forgive makes you the angry person. Which brings me to Kakachkuk. I've learned too, this is another Tlingit story, from Sitka. We'll be in Sitka in a few days. Kakachkuk was a sea captain in one of those big canoes. And he and his crew were paddling mightily to catch a seal, or at least what they thought was a seal. It was probably a mirage. But they were chasing it, and they were so intent on catching the seal, they didn't notice the storm coming up behind them. By the time they did, it was too late. The wind was howling, the rain was falling, and they spent 3, 4, 5 days just bailing the canoe and trying to stay afloat as the canoe was pushed further and further out into the Pacific Ocean. When the sun finally came out, they were far, far from home. And there was again another speck of an island on the horizon to which they paddled. This was a long, skinny island with most of the trees broken by the monsoon, the hurricane, whatever you want to call it. And these, in the Tlingit version, it says these trees were like huge blades of grass. And they'd been broken off. They were all hollow on the inside. And fresh water filled the interior of each of these trees. So while there was no lake or pond or river on that island, they had plenty of fresh water there because the storm had filled all these hollow trees with water. Now, what tree, if you break it in half, is hollow on the inside and looks like a huge blade of grass?
Bamboo.
Bamboo. We don't have that in this forest. The closest bamboo, my kids always guess Hawaii, but I don't think they made it that far. But the Kuril Islands, just south of Kamchatka, just north of Japan, has bamboo. So it means he was washed in this storm to the other side of the North Pacific Ocean, a huge distance. Now they had no idea where they were. But Kakachkuk knew something about the structures of the world. He knew that the sun moves slightly further north every day from the winter solstice to the summer solstice. Every day it moves a few degrees further north until the first day of summer, June 21st. And then, if you're living in Sitka like he did, the sun stays there for 4 days. It doesn't budge. It rises in the same place every day. And in Sitka, on the first day of summer, it rises above the volcano, which we call Mount Edgecombe, 4 days in a row. So every day he was getting up and watching the sunrise, plotting how it was rising further and further north, until it stopped, rose 4 times right there, and then began retreating. Now he knows on the horizon where home is. And although he saved there was lots of sea mammals on that island, more sea lions who like to sunbathe, easy to catch when you could sneak up on them. They had plenty of meat. They cut the sea lion skins into, like some kids like to peel their orange in one long twirl. That's how they cut the sea lion skins and then wove them together into yards and yards, actually kilometers of rope. And then he attached a huge rock to the bottom of that and used that as an anchor. So they headed off with all this dried meat in the boat, all these sea lions that they had killed and dried the meat so it's nice and light, but also plenty of protein. And they headed across the open sea. And they arrived home on the annual anniversary of their disappearance. Now in Tlingit culture, when someone dies, their name is like vacated. And that name is held as unoccupied or unclaimed for a full year. And at the end of the year, you have a memorial feast in which you end the grieving for that person who died a year before. And you give their name to whoever by clan consent is going to receive it. It's sort of like Charles, Lady Di's ex-husband, the Prince of Wales. Yeah. By now he should be Charles III. Unfortunately, he can't become Charles III yet, and you all know why. Elizabeth II is still alive. So until she vacates the throne, and until there's a 40-day grieving period, then we'll have the coronation, bring him into Westminster Abbey, put all the crown and jewels and scepter and the rest in his, and he'll get his real name. But it can't happen while the current monarch is still alive. That's true for every Tlingit name. You get your real name when the person who has it now dies, and not the day they die. A year later, when the grieving period is officially ended, and then it's a coronation. You call this person forward, and publicly this person gets their name. Well, Kakachkuk came back on the year anniversary of his disappearance, and they were having what's called in Tlingit the ku'ich, the memorial feast to end the grieving, because they thought he was gone a year before, and they're about to give out his name. So basically, Kakachkuk arrives in time for his own funeral. The importance here is that he arrives at Mount Edgecombe, the volcano, and he carves a petroglyph It's in Tlingit called the canoe landing place. It's a sun and a canoe, not a great memorial, but it proves to all Tlingits that this is a true story because that's where Kakachkuk returned, right? And he also had written a song to commemorate their exploit that all Tlingit people still sing. What more evidence do you need that this is a true story? The petroglyphs are there, we sing his song, we do his dance, Kakachkuk is real. And there's no way a Tlingit would believe otherwise. Now, the song of Kakachkuk has no intelligible words. And this is true for many Native American songs. The words don't mean anything. Well, then how could it be Kakachkuk's song? Well, we don't have a lot of songs like this, but we do have some. I don't even have to sing the words. I can just recite the syllables and ask you, what holiday does this remind you of? Fa la 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 la, la 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 la. You get it, right? If you're part of this culture, you know. If I sang that to my Ugandan altar boy, he would have no idea what I was talking about, right? But if you're part of this culture, you know. Somehow, fa la 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 associates with Christmas. Christmas is the birth of Christ, and we can now tell the whole story in Bethlehem. But fa la 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 doesn't give you any evidence, any information at all about the story itself. Nevertheless, there's that immediate association. Same thing with Kakachkuk's song. There's no point in asking someone to please translate that. There is no translation, and it's not because the words are too hard, it's because there really aren't intelligible words. And many Native American songs are like this. They don't have, but all you have to do is sing the first 3 syllables of Kakachkuk's song, and every Tlingit will know and associate that with that story. Well, the rest of us would say, well, what was that? It was like, these Tlingit-sounding syllables, which mean nothing to us, but you see, this is the whole point. In their culture, that's an important song. And in our culture, it doesn't mean anything, and if you asked someone to translate it, they couldn't do it, and if they did, it would be nonsense. But this is the culture we're dealing with, the Tlingit culture of Southeast Alaska. Oh, we're probably running out of time. I do want to tell this other story, though. Not only do traditional people have, what for us Orthodox is a perfectly reasonable curriculum, because we actually have the same curriculum. We spend far less time telling the stories and far more time singing about them. Huh? How many times have you read the first chapters of Genesis in your life? But at every Vespers we sing Psalm 104. The singing about it is more fun than the telling of the story. The celebration of the event takes longer and is way more enjoyable. We have far more Christmas carols than the texts of Matthew and Luke would indicate. The stories are fairly short. We get the kings in one and the shepherds in the other, but they've inspired hundreds, maybe thousands of Christmas carols, and we all go caroling in many languages here. But you see what I'm saying? This repertoire is derived from this, and it reinforces this. The core are the stories, but the celebration and the ceremonies are what bring it to life and allow people to really enter into the reality of those stories. So there's another kind of time here besides the ones I've discussed. And to do that, I actually have to introduce you to some Yupik grammar. This last section of my talk today is also about time, but it's not about German time versus Ukrainian time. We covered that already. This is actually a different kind of time for which the ancient Greeks had a name, and we don't. It's exactly, I believe, the kind of time the deacon is inferring in the original Greek at the start of our liturgy, Kairos estin. He doesn't say Chronos estin. Greeks had the sense, the experience, and therefore the name for 2 very different kinds of time. Chronos is where we get chronological, sequential time. We all understand Chronos. Today, tomorrow, the next day, the historical timeline. But I believe that traditional cultures, Yupiks, Tlingits, our people, actually still experience what the ancient Greeks did. They experience and live in Kairos. It's a concept we don't have in English. We have to go back to the Greeks to even find anything like this. But I have to, the only way to explain this, I think, is to go back some autobiographical material. Matushka is not here tonight. She's heard this lecture too often. But she's deeply involved in the story. We have 4 kids. I don't think I noticed this during my wife's first pregnancy. Anastasia was born in October. My wife was certainly doing this in that pregnancy, but I didn't notice. I didn't catch on. Katerina was born in January, and that's when I noticed my wife behaving in a very strange way. Now, pregnant women often do, but this is a Yupik thing. First of all, she's not a morning person. She's more of a productive in the evening and even late, and goes to bed late and then gets up later. And I'm the opposite. I'm really useless in the evening. My energy, my creative time is first thing in the morning. So we're opposite. During her pregnancy, she's up before I. And not just up, but I notice her in 20 below zero weather, she's coming in from outside. At 6 in the morning, I say to this woman, "Where did you go?" And she says, "Out." Well, that was obvious, but who gets up at 6 in the morning and 20 below temperature, it's still dark, blizzard conditions? Why would you go out? I don't want to go out. I'm going to have to go out in a few hours, but I don't want to. And you just got up early and went out? Why? And she says, "It's what we do." And I'm thinking, we who? And then I realized what she's saying is, this is what Yupik expected mothers do. They get up early and they leave the house. What you do is, I'm thinking, okay, I don't know what to ask. I'm stumped. I don't know what the follow-up here is. So I drop it, because I don't know what to ask. She's clearly in her beam of light. For her, it's obvious. I'm in my beam of light looking at hers. I can't make sense of it, but until I can step into hers, I'm not going to be able to make sense of it. I know that much. Okay, drop it. There's no way you're going to get to the bottom of this. 4 months later, maybe 5, I'm invited to be a graduation speaker at a boarding school in rural Alaska. That's when we still have them. And the rumor was that I could speak like a human being before my arrival. I land late, I throw my sleeping bag and knapsack on a bunk in the dormitory, and I hurry over to the dining hall. I go quickly through the cafeteria line, I sit down at a table by myself. Within seconds, I'm surrounded by 6, 7, 8, 9 Yupik teenage boys. And they're going to test how real my humanity is, apparently. They ask me this question, "Gituzit, who are you?" Easy question, I can answer. Atachtayaga, the little drifter. It's my Yupik name. Okay, nailed that one. Chamyunguzit, what village are you from? Here, Allentown, Pennsylvania will not work. So I kind of sidestepped this question and said, Aipaka, my spouse, Quitlog is a person from Quitlog. Good enough. And then they asked me a question I could not understand. And for you to understand why this was so tough, I have to give you a little grammar lesson. We'll start with the base word, ting. If you walked up to a Yupik person and said ting, they would have no idea what you're talking about. But it is the base word for the concept of flight. Something flying, the verb for to fly. Tingok, he, she, or it is flying. Now it's a full word. But by itself it doesn't mean a thing. But tingok is flying. Tingyoktok, he or she wants to fly. Tingyoktok. Tingyumitok, he or she doesn't want to fly. Tingyumitok. Tingyumichik suganakok, he or she probably will not want to fly. Tengataktok, it's about to fly. You get the idea.
Okay. Are they related to the Germans?
No, but they say the Germans had an easier time of learning this than most other people. Now we switch ting to ting soon. The ending soon is a tool or machine used for verb. So in this case, a machine used for flying. Ting soon, an airplane. Ting sutikpak, one big machine used for flying. One big airplane. Ting sutikpak. So now, ting sutikpaliyoktok. This ending means to build or make. So now we have he or she is building a big airplane. Okay? Notice the word order is exactly the opposite of English. Okay. Because what we say first is what they say last. It takes just as long to say it. Okay, now we have... See, I worked on this. He or she probably will not want to build a big airplane. I just took all the endings from the first part and added on to the second. And now, just to show off, I made the longest word I've ever made. You probably will not want to build a big airplane, will you? That's the way the language works. You add things on. What we would call adjectives or adverbs or even pronouns get added to the base concept. Okay. So now we start with another word, an. An by itself means nothing, just like drin means nothing. Anok. He went out. He's going out. She's going out. They're going out the door. They're exiting. Okay. An chekok. He or she will go out. An kataktok. He or she's about to go out. An shrok. He or she went out. This is the base word for my question with the teenage boys. An. And they started with this question. Na. Na by itself doesn't mean anything. It means where. But it needs an ending. Nani, in where. Nutmun, to where. Nakin, from where. So the question that stumped me was just these two simple words. Nakin, from where. Anshozit. Did you exit? They asked me first what your name is. Then they asked where are you from. And then they asked the question that stumped me. From where did you exit? Well, the last thing I'd come out of was the dorm. There's not really a Yupik word for dorm, but you can easily make one. You take the verb and the ending vik, and it means place for. So kawagavik, yeah, anagavik, place for pooping. Outhouse. In the Bethel airport, that's what they have over the word toilet. It's anagavik. So place for poop, yeah. This is, an anvik is place for exiting. The place you go out, the exit, Anvik, the place for going out. And there's even a village called Anvik, which that's what the word that the village means. It's the place where the river, it's the mouth of the river. Anyway, in this case, Anshuzit, Nakin Anshuzit. Well, I had to make up a word for dormitory. Well, that's not hard. The word for sleeping is kawak, kawagavik, place for sleeping. Kawagavigamuk, from the place for sleeping, from the dormitory. I'd never made that word before, but Yupik is quite fluid. You can make up your own words. I could have used lying down. Inagavik, the place where you lie down. Inagavigamuk, from the place that you lie down. They looked at me funny and shook their heads. And when I looked puzzled, they said it again, slower and louder. Nakin Anshozit. Slower and louder didn't help. The last thing I had come out of before that was the airplane. So I said Ting Sutmuk, from the machine used for flying. Ting Sutmuk, and again I got this weird. And finally I had to surrender. I can't understand you. And they switched to English. Where were you born? Not the airplane or the dormitory. But remember, that's what my wife was doing. She was going out. So, I remember this image. The house and the world have the same structure, right?
Right.
If you look at it another way, the house is the womb-shaped. The traditional house, even though we don't live in these kind of houses, behaviors persist even though cultural externals change. My wife is getting up early and leaving the house. So I go back to her and I say, honey, I know I asked you this question before, but I didn't know how to follow it up. You're expecting, you get up early, you wash, you dress. It's cold outside, you put on your coat. You go out, and then you come back in. Is there anything special about what you do when you get out there? Or is there anything special about how you go out? And she looks at me like, duh. Because again, she's in her beam of light. For her, it's obvious. I'm looking at her like, it doesn't make any sense to me. She says, of course, an expectant woman gets up early. She shouldn't lie around. She should be active all day. She gets up early, she washes, she dresses, and she goes out, passing through the doorway, head first without pausing, head first without going directly out, head first without stopping in the passage, head first and going directly out into the world.
The way the baby's going to come.
This is the way to be born, baby. Please. Right?
There you go.
She's enacting birth for 9 months. It's prenatal education for the child, right? Baby, this is how to do it. Please, head first, no stopping. Let's make this easy, right? Now, here's my final point, though. That passage, oh, it's back here. I lost it. Oh, here it is. That action was not invented by my wife the last time in 1982. No. She learned it from her mother. And she learned it from her mother. And she learned it from her mother. It's believed back to the very first mother who ever was. And since then, that's what mothers do. They get up early, they leave the house, passing out. So what my wife is doing is keros. She is repeating a pattern that is not her invention, but that puts her in solidarity with all her ancestors. She can get up early in the morning and not go out. She can go out backwards, but that breaks the pattern. But why would you want to do that? There's a meaningful way of behaving. You can conform your life to that meaningful and appropriate behavior or not. If it's or not, it's your loss. But this is my point. In our culture, we divide our chronos, the time of our lives, the hourglass sand as it's draining. We divide that into work and play. We're either on the job or we're free, we're off. Labor and leisure are the two quantities, but it's all chronos. It's all chronological time. Traditional people try to escape chronos, to leave it behind, and to shift from living a chronological life to living a life in keros, sacred, meaningful time. Now, what makes it sacred and meaningful? The repetition of a pattern. The pattern is a paradigm. Every time you repeat it, you enter into that reality. And the more you live in that reality, the more meaningful you live. You can do it some other way, but it'll be meaningless. Or you can do it the way we've always done it, the way your mother taught you, the way we always have since the beginning of the world, and that makes you a real person. Doing it your own way, some other way, on your own, first of all, it's dangerous. We warn all the boys not to do that. But more importantly, it's meaningless. You're keeping yourself in chronos, meaningless time. Keros is meaningful time. And the time of your life is not work and play. It's either living meaningfully or living meaninglessly. So traditional people have what we would call a ritual way of getting out of bed. What do you do the first 2 or 3 things in the morning? What do you do the last 3 things at night? And these are not things that you make up. They're not things that you invent. It's not some new innovative way of behaving. It's in solidarity with all your ancestors. And more than that, it's in solidarity with all your contemporaries who are also doing the same thing, because every expectant mother in the village is also getting up early and leaving the house head first without stopping. So you're becoming a real person because that's the way real people behave. Now, I would say the Christian, well, we could say the Old Testament, the Hebrew, the Jewish equivalent of this is Seder. You don't make up your own Seder menu. The Passover is not up for grabs. You don't serve cheeseburgers, God forbid, right? It's the same 4 questions every year at the Passover meal. The youngest son asks the same. What if you change the questions? You break the cycle. You break the chain. It's meaningful only to the extent that you repeat the way we've always done it. The same menu with the same prayers and the same language. And even if you don't speak Hebrew, a Jewish family is going to sit around the table and sing and pray in Hebrew that night. And it puts you in solidarity with all your ancestors back to the time of Moses. And it also puts you in solidarity with all the Jewish families who are having their Seder that night. It makes you Jewish. Right?
Right?
That's keros. It's a whole evening of keros. We had keros. That's why the deacon says to the priest at the beginning of the liturgy, keros estin. It is now time for meaningful time. We're stepping out of chronos, meaningless time, and we're stepping into meaningful time. And we're not making this up as we go. It's the same liturgy that puts us in solidarity with all the saints throughout all our history who have celebrated the same liturgy. And what theologians, denominations have fought over what the Eucharist really is. The real presence. I don't know what the opposite of that would be, the real absence. I mean, some of the terms get pretty silly. But the point is, whatever the apostles got in the upper room in 33 AD is what we had this morning. That's keros.
With a commercial.
That's right. So, what I'm trying to say is, when a clique can have a potlatch, a memorial meal, with speeches and songs, according to the rubric, right? It's not, people aren't making this up as they go. There's a certain number of speeches, there's a certain other number of speeches, there's eating, there's some dancing, then we go back to the speeches, but it's just like our rubrics. These meals can last, the longest one I was ever at was 3 days and 2 nights. Because the speeches got that long, and the dinners got that big, and a man had lived to be almost 100 years old, and he had like 7 names, and all these names had to be passed down. And then in memory of the person who died, and also in honor of the people who have just been named, in the name of both, because it's the same name, gifts are given. I would say in Angoon they gave away about $100,000 worth of gifts in those 3 days. So this is far from dead, this culture. But it's 3 days of Keros. It's 3 days of Keros. And we have, Pascha is a whole night of Keros. We don't make it up as we go. It's the same songs we sang last year, and the ones our ancestors sang since the time the canons were written back in the 7th century. But it's Keros. We understand Keros, right? What I'm saying is, traditional people try to live in Keros as much as possible by what we would consider to be ordinary daily chores. The way you go out the door, the way you cut the meat apart to put it to the soup, the way you take out the garbage. When that muskrat bones went back into the lake and that hunter said, "Chalitaikina," he said what all hunters have always said when they returned the muskrat bones back to the lake, right? That's a moment of Keros, meaningful, sacred time. I believe that this is critical to the Native American idea, the Alaska Native reception of Orthodoxy. They understood, we've got Keros. They didn't name it that, they don't speak Greek. But they live in sacred time as much as possible. My wife going out the door is a moment of Keros. Everyday human activities are sanctified by the fact that there's a pattern that we repeat, and that the repetition of that pattern makes our lives meaningful. We've got that in Orthodoxy, whether we call it that consciously or not. Native people have that, they got it. This is what makes them even deeper, I would say, in a deeper level, Orthodox, because we've got Keros and they got Keros. And we can affirm that their sacred actions can be sacred to us. That we don't have to criticize them for saying at the end of the meal, Huyana. And that means God, the hunter, the animal, the cook, and everybody at the meal. Why would we want to destroy that? Why would we want to undermine that? Why would we want to attack that? We can affirm that, because that's how real people behave.
And I think the Kronos has ended.
Kronos is my enemy.
I think we're beyond our time, but thank you. That was wonderful.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Chronologically.
All right.